This series of events took place over a span of about 4 years, starting when I was around 8 years old. I don't recall the exact date of the first occurrence, but I remember the feeling perfectly. It started as a recurring nightmare that I would have every few months. The structure of the dream was always identical. I would be lying in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, but I wouldn't be looking through my own eyes. It was an out-of-body experience, like I was floating near the ceiling fan, looking down at my own sleeping body. The dissociation was terrifying. I would try to scream or move, but I was completely paralyzed, just a silent observer floating in the dead air of my room. Once the panic of the paralysis settled, I would start to notice that the room wasn't quite right. The geography of the furniture was correct, but small details were twisted. The posters on my walls would be upside down. The digital clock on my nightstand wouldn't show numbers, just random alien symbols flashing in red. But the most disturbing change was always the closet door. In reality, I always kept it shut tight. In the dream, it was always cracked open just an inch, revealing a darkness that seemed thicker than the rest of the room. After I noticed the closet, the next phase of the nightmare would begin. A pair of pale, long hands would slowly emerge from the darkness of the closet crack. They would grip the edge of the doorframe, knuckles white with tension. Then, a face would appear. It was a man with greasy, matted hair and eyes that were wide open, unblinking. He wouldn't attack me. He would just slide out of the closet and crawl on all fours to the side of my bed. He would kneel there, inches from my sleeping face, and whisper things I couldn't understand. It sounded like static or a radio tuned between stations. That's usually when the sheer terror would force me to wake up, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. I told my parents about it after the third or fourth time. My mom dismissed it as night terrors, which are common for kids, and my dad just told me to stop watching scary movies. They did the standard check of the room, looked under the bed, checked the closet, but obviously, they found nothing. It was just a dream, right? That's what I forced myself to believe. The dreams continued sporadically for years. Always the same man, the same whispering, the same paralysis. It became routine. I learned to live with it. But then, the routine broke. The dreams stopped for about 6 months. I thought I had finally outgrown them. Until one night in late October, I woke up, but not from a dream. I woke up because I was cold, freezing cold. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes, confused because the thermostat was usually set high. That's when I felt a draft hitting my face. I looked across the room and my blood ran cold. My bedroom window, which was on the second floor and always locked, was wide open. The screen had been cut. I sat there, frozen in fear, unable to process what I was seeing. And then, I heard it. A soft, wet cough coming from inside my closet, not in a dream. In reality, I didn't scream. I couldn't. I slowly slid out of bed, terrified that any noise would trigger an attack, and bolted for the door. I sprinted to my parents' room and woke them up in a panic. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate while my mom called 911. When the police arrived, they found muddy boot prints on the roof outside my window and a makeshift sleeping bag set up inside the deep recesses of my walk-in closet, behind the boxers of winter clothes. The police found food wrappers, a flashlight, and a notebook. The notebook was filled with drawings of me sleeping. The scariest part wasn't the intrusion itself, but what the police told us later. Based on the evidence, the man hadn't just broken in that one night. He had been living in the attic and coming down into my closet periodically for months, maybe years. The recurring dream I had been having of a man watching me sleep wasn't a dream at all. I had been waking up during his visits, and my brain, unable to process the trauma, had turned it into a nightmare to protect me. I never slept in that room again. I want to keep this focused on the facts, because even retelling it makes me question my own sanity. This happened last summer during a camping trip with 2 of my college friends, Alex and Ben. We were experienced campers, so we decided to hike deep into a national forest, miles away from the designated campsites. We wanted total isolation. We set up our tents in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine trees. By the time night fell, The darkness was absolute. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face without a flashlight. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, especially after a day of hiking, but that night I had a bizarre, feverish dream. I was standing in the middle of an empty stadium. The lights were off, but I could hear thousands of people in the stands. They weren't cheering. They were whispering. The whispering grew louder and louder until it became a roar. Suddenly, the noise cut out completely, and a single voice over the PA system boomed. "Listen to the rhythm." I snapped awake. My heart was hammering in my chest. I was in my tent, lying in my sleeping bag. The forest was dead silent. I checked my watch. 3:14 a.m. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was just the altitude messing with my head. I closed my eyes to go back to sleep, but then I heard it. The rhythm. It was a whistling sound, but it wasn't a bird, and it wasn't the wind. It was a melodic, human whistle. TWIT-TWOO ... pause ... tutu. It was coming from the woods, maybe 50 yards out. At first, I thought maybe Alex or Ben had gone to use the bathroom and was messing around. I unzipped my tent slightly and peered out. The embers of our campfire were dying, casting a weak orange glow. I could see their tent adjacent to mine. It was zipped shut and silent. Twit 2. The sound was closer now, maybe 30 yards. A cold feeling washed over me. We were 10 miles from the nearest road. There was no reason for anyone to be out here at 3 a.m. without a light. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The whistling stopped, but then I heard the crunch of dry leaves. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps, circling the perimeter of our campsite. The steps were heavy, bipedal. Definitely a person. I didn't know what to do. If I yelled, I might provoke them. If I stayed silent, they might come in. The footsteps stopped right behind my tent. I could hear the fabric of the tent rustling as something brushed against it. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I could hear breathing on the other side of the thin nylon wall. Ragged, wheezing breaths. The person stood there for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only a minute. Then, the whistling started again. Soft and low, right next to my ear, separated only by the tent wall. Then, silence. The footsteps slowly crunched away, fading back into the deep woods. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there, clutching my knife, until the sun came up. When morning broke, I scrambled out and woke up Alex and Ben. They were groggy and didn't believe me at first, thinking I was trying to scare them. But then I showed them the ground behind my tent. The soil was soft from a recent rain, clearly pressed into the mud. Circling our entire camp and stopping right at the back of my tent were bare footprints. No shoes. Just bare feet, massive and scarred. We packed up camp in record time and hiked back to the car, almost running. We reported it to the ranger station at the trailhead. The ranger's face went pale when I mentioned the whistling. He told us that they had been finding illegal encampments in that area for months, usually belonging to fugitives or drifters, but they had never had a report of someone approaching campers so boldly. I don't go dispersed camping anymore. If I hadn't woken up from that dream warning me to listen, I might have been asleep when he was standing inches from my head. This happened about 6 months ago. My girlfriend Sarah was out of town for a business trip, so I had the apartment to myself. It's a ground floor unit in a decent complex, but the security isn't exactly Fort Knox. I spent the night playing video games and ordered pizza, eventually crashing on the couch in the living room around 1 a.m. I left the TV on low volume for background noise. I entered a dream that felt incredibly real. In the dream, I was still on the couch. The TV was still playing. I felt thirsty, so I tried to get up to go to the kitchen, but as soon as I stood up, gravity shifted. The floor tilted at a 45-degree angle, and I slid down toward the hallway. I clawed at the carpet, trying to pull myself up, but the hallway kept stretching longer and longer, like an accordion. At the end of this infinite hallway, the front door was rattling violently. The wood was splintering, bending inward as if something massive was trying to smash it down. I woke up on the couch with a gasp. The TV was still on, playing an infomercial. The room was level. I rubbed my face, feeling the adrenaline fading. Just a nightmare, I muttered. I sat up and reached for the glass of water on the coffee table. As my hand touched the glass, the water inside turned black and started bubbling. Then, a hand shot out of the water and grabbed my wrist. I screamed and woke up again. A double false awakening. I was actually sweating now. I was still on the couch. The TV was off this time. The apartment was dead silent. I pinched my arm hard, feeling the sharp sting. Okay. I was definitely awake this time. The silence was heavy, oppressive. I had this nagging feeling that something was wrong. That primitive sense of being watched. I scanned the living room. Everything looked normal. Shadows from the streetlights outside, cut across the floor. 10 Primera, the Blue Italiano. The door to the hallway which leads to the bedrooms was closed. I always leave it open for airflow. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was the light underneath it. A thin, flickering yellow beam was spilling out from under the door, casting a long shadow on the hardwood. I froze. I knew for a fact that no lights were on in the back of the apartment. I live alone with Sarah. Nobody else should be there. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Did I leave a lamp on? Was it a reflection? I slowly got off the couch. My movements silent. I crept toward the hallway door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. As I got closer, I heard movement. It wasn't the settling of the building. It was the distinct sound of drawers opening and closing. Someone was rummaging through our bedroom. The terror was absolute. The dream about the door being smashed and suddenly felt like a warning I had ignored. I retreated to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife from the block, and pulled my phone out to dial 911. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit the buttons. I whispered the situation to the operator and hid behind the kitchen island, watching that strip of yellow light. A few minutes later, the light under the door shifted. Shadows moved across it. The footsteps were coming toward the living room. The handle of the hallway door slowly turned. I gripped the knife, ready to fight for my life. The door creaked open, and a silhouette of a man stepped into the living room, holding a flashlight. Just as he shined the beam toward the kitchen, red and blue lights exploded through the front window. The police had arrived silently and surrounded the building. They shouted through the bullhorn for the occupant to come out. The intruder, panicked, ran for the back patio door and shattered the glass to escape. The police tackled him in the courtyard. It turned out to be a guy who had been evicted from the complex 3 months prior. He still had a copy of the master key. He had been in the apartment for over an hour while I was sleeping on the couch, watching me, before deciding to loot the bedroom. The most disturbing part, the police said he had disabled the smoke detectors and had lighter fluid in his backpack. If I had unwoken up from that layered nightmare, if I had slept for 10 more minutes, I probably never would have woken up at all.